Welcome to the NSI Podcast, where technology, innovation, and strategy come together to empower today's IT leaders. In today's episode, we have our very own cybersecurity team on to take a deep dive into the white paper Gene Patrick published, Human versus Machine, the Strengths and Weaknesses of Automated Penetration Testing. You can find his paper at nextstepinnovation.com/blog. We break down the strengths, limitations, and potential risk of each method. Is manual penetration testing still important today? Stay tuned to find out and let us know what you think. We have Gene Patrick, Joseph Allen, cybersecurity engineers with our Next Step team, and Dr. David O'Gwynn, the director of our cybersecurity team. Well, I want to jump right in and start off with the first question, Gene. Can you briefly explain what automated penetration testing is and how it differs from manual pen testing?
Sure. So that's the whole crux of the paper itself. Automated penetration testing is a new tool set that we're seeing come out, a new platform for companies to try to automate and take out some of the labor and the overhead that's involved with actual penetration testing. Obviously, having a human on site or remotely performing a lot of the different TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures that go into an attack vector can be a little bit more expensive. And automated pen testing seeks to cut down on those costs, cut down on the time associated with it, and use preloaded libraries of attacks to quickly identify vulnerabilities in the network and provide some kind of feedback to the client.
Okay. Well, what do you see as the biggest advantages of using automated pen testing? I noticed you said time. Would that be the biggest advantage?
Time is a big one, especially when you're looking to, let's say, meet some kind of a legal requirement or something like that for having penetration testing performed, like the GLBA or something like that. Another big one is cost, obviously. Having a whole bunch of people come in and do some kind of penetration testing is going to cost a lot more than using an automated platform where you just provide licenses or purchase licenses for specific sets of computers that you want tested within the network. So I would say that time and cost are going to be two of the biggest factors that you're going to consider when you're talking about the differences between the two options.
Okay. And what about blind spots? What's the biggest blind spot you found with the automated pen testing?
Well, in general, this kind of leads into the conversation of context in cybersecurity. Automated pen testing solutions provide a lot of really good insight into things like patch levels. If you're running a computer that has a very old OS that hasn't been updated, it's very likely that you're going to see that a lot of zero-click exploits or one-click exploits exist within them. That's something like Eternal Blue or something like that. Updating is usually the way that you find a remediation for that. As far as manual penetration testing is concerned, humans are much more able to take a vulnerability that may seem benign in nature, like the guest account being enabled on a computer. That might be one where, what level of access does that really have? An automated solution might just say, hey, this is let's say a low to a medium severity. Go ahead and patch that up. Go ahead and make sure that account's disabled. A human may be able to take that vulnerability and chain it into a set of events to where, okay, this guest account that's enabled actually can lead to the full compromise of a host, the full compromise of a domain. So it's taking a vulnerability in isolation that an automated solution might not see as being as dangerous as it is, and finding out that, okay, well, if we chain this together with these separate other attack vectors that in isolation may not seem that egregious, it can turn into something really nasty.
Okay. Well, I know in your paper, I know you did demos and to write the paper. Did you find any significant false positives in your test?
As far as false positives were concerned, we didn't really hit on that many of those, mainly because we were using a very small network. We just developed a little lab with two Windows VMs, one being a server and one being a client. We left them completely unpatched. for the first run of the automated pen testing solution, and it did a pretty decent job of actually hitting on things that existed within those computers themselves. So as far as false positives were concerned, we didn't really find anything within our testing. That's not to say that wouldn't happen within a larger network. That's something that we see quite a bit with our vulnerability scans, which is adjacent to automated pen testing, but not as in depth. So in general, no, we didn't see that many false positives. But what we did see was that it missed a lot of things.
Okay. All right. Well, I know David had some deeper questions about your paper, so I would like to hear what David had to ask about that.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Cassie. So one of the questions that I have is what kind of drove you to write this paper to begin with? What was the sort of motivating factor for you?
Sure. Well, AI, and not AI, but automated pen testing solutions have become a really big selling point at this point for a lot of organizations. A lot of the top businesses have looked at them as a cheaper alternative to the traditional pen testing. If they're just trying to check a box and say, hey, we do pen testing every year, a lot of people have come under the misconception that having an automated solution checks that box completely and that they're good to go. And in some respects, you might be able to make that argument. And there is a place for automated pen testing, I believe. But as far as a replacement for humans, I just don't see that being the case, especially where we are now with automated solutions. Perhaps in the future that will change. But currently, the misconception that it's any kind of a one-to-one replacement for humans really drove me to want to take a look into how effective each are at their respective job.
So a question that I've got is you talked earlier, you were referring to the context, and I thought it was an interesting take on what it is that penetration testers do. Like, you use the word context. I would even maybe call it like a thread, right? It's for me, penetration testing. So, just so folks understand, I'm all three of us are penetration testers for the company. That's what we do. That's 90% of our job is doing penetration testing for clients. And for me, like the visual that I always saw was it's like when you're trying to get a sticker off of something, right? It's not a matter of just taking the sticker and ripping it right off. You got to get your thumbnail under the corner, right? You just pick a little bit of it, and then you pick a little bit harder, a little bit more, and a little bit more, and then suddenly the whole sticker comes off, right? That, a lot of, you mentioned the concept of the guest account, right? How many times have we been in an environment where, because we could get to the shares on a particular host with the guest account, that we were able to find, plain text credentials somewhere on that?
Yeah,
right?
Quite often. Yeah.
Right. So talk a little bit more about that context and how that played into your experimental apparatus.
Yeah, sure. So within the lab environment, we set it up purposefully in a insecure manner to where, like you said, the guest account was active on the client workstation. And what the automated solution is going to do is it's going to enumerate that. It's going to say, yes, it exists. Probably look for shares, try to enumerate shares, like you said. And in our case, we didn't have any shares configured on that host. So ultimately, it's just going to look at that and say, hey, this is a thing. You should probably take a look at it. We don't really put this on a severe criticality or anything like that. The issue in here becomes that guest access can allow us to do things like coerce RPC or coerce authentication from the host itself, which we can then turn around and do some other malicious activity with, ultimately resulting in the compromise of that host, which we turned around and demonstrated as a domain compromise. This is something that we've seen in several of the places that we pen tested, and it really it's just one of 1,000 or 1,000,000 different methods in which one little, like you said, pulling up the corner of a stamp can result in a devastating consequences as far as the domain's concerned. It's all about shutting down each and every piece of low-hanging fruit that exists on a network. in order to stop that initial peeling of the stamp from happening. The primary concern here is that the automated solutions, don't really identify them as being as severe as they may be, because they don't have the context of, okay, well, if you chain this together with this, this goes from being a medium or a low vulnerability to you need to take care of this right now vulnerability. So I mean that's the primary concern.
Yeah. So you you bring up something in the paper. You talk about the good old fashioned cyber kill chain, right? Which, I mean, back in the day when I was at Lincoln doing research on the blue side, the cyber kill chain was sacrosanct. It was the what was it? Who is it? Northrop? No, Lockheed. It's Lockheed, right?
Yeah.
Lockheed, yeah. So Lockheed's cyber kill train, TM trademark, was that's what people talked about as a cyber kill chain. But I always thought it was interesting once I started, doing penetration testing. You've got the cyber kill chain, and then you have the chain that you just talked about, the chain of events, right? The chain of this attack and this attack. Can you sort of differentiate between what is called, the concept of the cyber kill chain and then the sort of chain that you were talking about just now? Is that
sure?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So the cyber kill chain in its totality would be probably more aligned with a red team, in the sense that there's going to be a lot more reconnaissance involved, as far as what they would call OSINT, or open source intelligence gathering, where you're actually on the outside looking in, trying to find out what exists on the clear web, any kind of publicly identifiable information, publicly accessible information that kind of helps you to develop a map of your target and maybe their public facing surface. So that's going to be where an attack would start, and that's where you're going to see a lot more red teaming, where somebody is actually doing that open source reconnaissance. And then it also goes through the entire kill chain that we just talked about, which is more internally. Once you've gained some kind of access into the network, either through social engineering or somebody sneaking in and deploying a malicious USB stick, something like that, then you walk through your actual kill chain of weaponization, deployment, and everything like that. And that gets you through to your compromise of either a host or whatever asset on the network that you're targeting. And the kill chain also goes a little bit beyond what you would see in a typical just penetration test, which entails actual like C2, developing a command and control server, establishing one, and establishing some kind of persistence within the network, be it through like a rat or something like that. We typically, a penetration tester is not going to do all of those steps at the beginning and at the end. They usually work on an assumed breach or something similar, where there's already an asset that's on the network. So that's what we were more trying to demonstrate here. Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So no, that's a great point. So that's a question that for some of our listeners, they may not, they probably have experience. If they're interested in security, maybe they've watched Mr. Robot, or they've watched some shows, or watched some movies that involve so-called hacking. But let's sort of step back and talk about what is the difference between, say, a penetration test and a red team exercise. Right? Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, sure. So a red team, like I said, it's a lot more. The scope of the testing is a lot more expanded, in the sense that you're not just putting a device on the network and simulating all the work and time that goes into actually getting a device on the network or getting a host compromised. You're kind of cutting all of that out in a penetration test. In a red team, they're really simulating from start to finish what a threat actor would likely do, simulating a real world attack, in the sense that oftentimes maybe one person in a company knows that you're doing the testing, as opposed to a whole network security team that's watching you as you go through. You may end up getting arrested. You may end up, causing some kind of DDoS or a DOS or something like that within the network. You might actually like damage something. It's more to try to highlight the impact of a real world threat actor, as opposed to helping a blue team identify where vulnerabilities might exist within the network. I would say that a red team is more of a a testing of your processes as well as your controls. As far as how do people get into the building, what exists on the internet that can be tied to your network? Does everybody have LinkedIn's that have any kind of information about how the company works? Are people active on social media, things like that? It goes a lot deeper than just a penetration test that's strictly typically looking at, your administrative and your technical controls.
So it's almost like a red team exercise is a full and complete test of all of your defense, including the defense in depth, guards, guns, and gates, all the way down to
Right.
servers and clients, right? So it's like a red team exercise is kind of what, like you were saying, if an actual threat actor, an actual bad guy from X country wanted to come in and do damage or cause some sort of harm to a company or to a facility, how would they actually do that? Would they be able to get in and do damage to the facility? Right. Full stop. Right.
Right.
Whereas a penetration test is more, it's constrained. What are some of the constraints that characterize a penetration test?
Well, what I like that you always do with the clients is you kind of illustrate a penetration test as a smoke test of their network, to where we are going to be as loud as we possibly can when we get in there. We're not going to use a whole lot of stealth techniques. We want to go in and bang around and really show what vulnerabilities are within the network, what can easily be exploited, but also provide them with a test for their own security infrastructure, be it if they have an on-site SOC or remote SOC, or if they just have EDR or XDR implementations that they monitor themselves, showing them what's actually going on within the network and seeing whether or not they're able to identify, okay, well, this is a malicious attack that's happening. This is something that shouldn't be going on. Somebody's spraying passwords, things like that. That's something you're going to see a lot more within a penetration test, as opposed to a red team, where they're really going to try to be stealthy. They don't want to get caught. The whole point is to try to show how destructive something can be. Where a penetration test might be a smoke test, a red team is lighting the house on fire. Yeah.
All right. All right. Go ahead.
So as far as the constraints that you were mentioning, like I said, we typically start with an assumed breach, where we are putting a device on the network. And for the most part, we are just banging around, doing enumeration, knocking on every door that we can, and just trying to show, hey, these are the vulnerabilities that exist. Here's your report that details what we found and our remediations. But just as important is, what did you guys observe during our testing? I think is a big takeaway from it as well.
Yeah. So Joseph, you've been very quiet this entire time. I'm going to sort of sidestep the conversation very, very briefly. You actually predate me in the company. Just for background, I was a professor at a small little liberal arts college in Jackson, Mississippi, and Joseph was one of my first students there. I had the pleasure to be able to teach him for, what was it, 2 years? You were there for 2 years?
Yeah,
Like
about two.
About
Closer
2
to 3.
years. So he was a very, very good student to have as a teacher, because he would correct me in class. And the first time he did it, it was a real shock, and I got mad. And then I looked up what he was saying, and he was right, and that became a habit. So eventually, when he would correct me, I would just say, "Okay, Joseph, tell me about it," and he'd be able to tell me about it. But so you started with the company back in 2017, is that right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think so. You started out as an intern and then went on full time. And I think I found out about the company from you. I remember having a conversation in Fitzhugh with you. Fitzhugh is a hall. It's just one of the buildings. But you told me about this company called Next Step and about Trent and everything. And I remember after having that conversation, I basically cold called or cold emailed Trent and said, you need to hire me for the summers. And so I started out as a summer contractor working with Joseph and with Trent. And so, Joseph, one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about is how have you seen the penetration testing world change over since 2017 when you first started all the way up until now?
Oh, I mean, it really is a totally different world. And even when I joined, right, when I first joined Next Step, I was shadowing Trent, right? I was the intern, and I was following Trent around, and I was just watching him do his pen testing. And even then, so I remember actually pretty vividly the first org that we pen tested, and I remember going to this organization, and I remember watching Trent break in, and I can't remember if I joined and this was like the middle of the audit. I don't remember that, but I remember him walking in, and he just opens up a Metasploit console. And so the Metasploit framework is it's a security tool. It contains a lot of exploit packages. We call them modules. And so different exploits have a different module. And I remember him opening a Metasploit module called Eternal Blue, and he said something like, "Hey, look at this," and he just compromised the domain right there, right in front of me. And he showed me the scanner, right? And just at the time, everything was vulnerable to Eternal Blue, right? And I remember even after that, so it's like even after he got that one way in, he kept going. And I remember the other thing that he exploited at this organization is he actually showed me how he could pull up a Cisco switch, and with SNMP, he was able to pull the private config file for that switch with the password for the switch already in it. And I think he showed me we were able to find where that password was reused on the network.
Oh boy.
And yeah, that stuff isn't really here anymore. Even then, like the Cisco configs, but I think what are they called? Type 7 passwords. That was becoming less common. But for the first couple of years, Eternal Blue was the big thing.
Yeah, I remember Eternal Blue was our win button. I mean, that was the first thing that you tested. You walked in, you tested on all of the different systems out there. You would get at least one, and then you just be able to dump everything from that, and then you just move from there, right? So to sort of bring this conversation back to what Gene's paper is about. So to me, the crux of the paper is the concept of context. And you use the word context, right? And it's that, yes, Eternal Blue will give you, for example, a win button on an individual server, but how does that then lead to, can you explain for the audience, let's say I have popped a server. How does that give me the domain? Assuming that I haven't popped the domain controller, right? So let's just say I popped an individual server with Eternal Blue. Back in 2017, how would that give me the domain?
Well, I mean, that can manifest in multiple ways. I mean, you might be able to extract the logon session for a user and their logged on token. That's something that can be abused elsewhere within the domain. Another big one that we see almost everywhere that we go, way more places than I'd like to see, is reuse of things like the local administrator credentials. So the local administrator password being reused across a bunch of different hosts. It provides a path for lateral movement right there in the sense that, okay, I have access to this one host through Eternal Blue. The local administrator password is reused across 50 hosts. Now I have access to 50 hosts with an administrative account, which again, lateral movement is the end all be all as far as domain compromise is concerned, because you are quickly expanding the number of hosts that you control and gathering information from them, be it through shares, be it through local files, be it through credentials saved for service accounts within LSA. There's a lot of different places where you can take a compromise of one host and help spread out across the network and eventually reach a compromise of the domain at large.
Yeah. It's more of that, my little analogy of pulling that sticker, right? Lateral movement is as you pull that sticker. Joseph, you unmuted. What you have to say?
I'm trying to figure out how to work some of the conversation about automated pen testing. But one thing that I keep thinking about, as we're having this conversation, is, honestly, back in the day, it would have been easier to automate a lot of this. At that time, we were still like Windows 7, Windows, even Windows XP was still around more than it is now. And on those older versions of Windows, they would have something called W Digest enabled. And so you would actually be able to often pull the plain text passwords for like the administrator user directly from the box with Eternal Blue.
I had forgotten about that. I had totally forgotten about that.
And I think it was Windows 10 that they disabled the functionality that led to that happening by default. But at the time, you could just pop the box with Eternal Blue, which just what's the best way to describe this? Eternal Blue is a really special exploit because not only
first off, give a quick background of it. Where did it come from?
Right. So Eternal Blue is the internal name for one of a series of exploits that was part of an NSA attack toolkit, which was leaked by an entity known as the Shadow Broker. And it's part of a series. There's actually several different exploits. So there's Eternal Synergy, Eternal Romance, Eternal Champion, and Eternal Blue. And they're all slightly different exploits. The same vulnerability is shared across all versions of Windows, but due to differences in how the different Windows versions work, there's different versions for each version of Windows. But they all kind of work the same. And what makes them special is when you get first of all, it is a weaponized exploit. So earlier I mentioned Metasploit. A Metasploit is basically a volunteer/community led project. Let's put a lot of the modules in Metasploit are developed by basically security volunteers, or is the best way to put it. They're not being paid to write modules for Metasploit oftentimes. I think that's fair to say. A lot of the modules are basically written by people on a best effort basis. But the NSA tools, which are part of a framework called Fuzzbunch, is actually the name of the kind of like their equivalent of Metasploit. Those are NSA exploits, right? Those are the actual exploits that are being used by the NSA to do NSA things with. And so Eternal Blue is just that much more effective than, say, a Metasploit module. It's going to work almost every time, something that a lot of Metasploit modules don't do. And the other big thing about Eternal Blue that stands out to me is that, especially with the NSA version of it, is it would bypass EDR almost every time. And that's because the way that it worked is it's actually putting a program, it's putting the remote access tool, if you will, into the Windows kernel, into privileged memory. So like the Metasploit version of Eternal Blue doesn't do this. It just uses the exploit to escalate a SMB session to admin status. But the NSA tool actually puts shellcode into the kernel. And so that's why it would often bypass all EDR, because it's just completely sidestepping, regular process space.
Yeah, I guess the only way for EDR currently, and this is getting into the weeds, dear audience, but I guess the only way for an EDR to do that would be to hook into whatever tools Eternal Blue was using.
Well, it's SMB.
Actually,
it's in the kernel, right? It is all kernel space.
Right. Which is a lot of times the again in the weeds, but when you a lot of the EDR tooling makes heavy use of simply watching for the use of DLLs as opposed to low-level system calls. And so or I should say the kernel level call. So the NSA is the NSA, and they do NSA things.
Well,
right?
even if you're looking at the system calls, it's not using syscalls, right? It is from a process perspective. It's not even happening in the process space.
Right.
Anyway, the reason I bring that up is because at the time you could just pull passwords, right, with this tool, and there's nothing that could be done about it. It happens almost 100% of the time. It's that reliable. It's that clean.
Yeah.
And not like that.
That has changed over the years, right? So Gene, how would you say things have changed?
Well, I mean, there's a lot more protection that's being placed within a Windows OS around things like the LSA and the SAM registry hives, all the places that you usually go to extract passwords. I know Joseph can talk a little bit more about that, but as far as Windows 11 is concerned, Server 2025, they're taking a lot more steps to try to actually lock that kind of stuff down and make it more difficult to extract. And to your point, I would say that EDRs, things like that, have become a lot better at using heuristics as opposed to signatures to try to determine when a malicious action is taking place based on what a program is doing as opposed to the composition of the program itself. So there's a lot of different ways that they're using to detect malicious activity nowadays, be it at the network level or on a host itself. So the scope of tooling that's out there to actually detect this kind of activity is growing every day.
Yeah. So one of the things that there's definitely the defensive side of things, right? And so just for the audience's sake, when we do penetration testing, the only constraint that we place on the so-called blue team is that we ask them not to take direct action, meaning that when they see something, they're not allowed to just yank our laptop off the network, right? They're not allowed to go in and modify passwords in the process, right? That would be for more of a red team exercise. Like because in a red team, you're trying to be quiet. And if you're not quiet, then you get punished, right? But in a penetration test, we don't, we ask that the blue team not take direct action against us because we're not testing their personnel, we're testing their controls, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've seen over since the 2017 until now is that we almost never, in fact, in my case, it's really almost never use Metasploit for anything now. We primarily currently work with sort of base enterprise level protocols, right? And that's how we get what we get for the most part. And I bring that up just really to motivate the question, how does that play into the concept of context and the difference between what an automated tool can do versus a person, right? How would you say? Either one of you guys to take that ball and run with it?
I think that begs the bigger question of what's the biggest attack surface that we see in most of these networks, and in my experience, it's Active Directory. It's things that need to be configured by a human at some point. There's some amount of human interference that goes into it, and I think that automated pen testing is really good at detecting things like OS patching, stuff like that. It's not so good at detecting misconfigurations. One of the main things that I was disappointed in with the solution that we tested was that it did no kind of analysis of the Active Directory attack surface when it did the automated pen testing.
Was that part of your actual experiment? Did you set that up? Did you deliberately set Active Directory up in an insecure way?
Well, we had just set it up. We had not put any thought into actually how Active Directory was configured in the sense of trying to have it be pen tested. We just wanted to see if it pulled any kind of analysis at all, because it provides it provides step by step as it goes through each one of its TTPs of, okay, we're doing this, we're checking this, we're going through this. And it never showed any kind of analysis of the Active Directory domain or the Active Directory population scope within the network. So that's where we see so many of these misconfigurations and dangerous privileges that are being afforded between user objects, computer objects, groups, things like GPOs. We found in the past any kind of access to a GPO can be really dangerous. The ability to, make your own machine account on the network. There's a whole bunch of different attack vectors that all stem from an Active Directory misconfiguration. And by misconfiguration, I mean, oftentimes things that are set by default that you haven't gone in and changed. So I think that kind of illustrates where things have gone within the last, 4 years since I've been on this team. Is things have gone more from, okay, you have an outdated OS, that's how we got in, that's how we won, to this low level configuration that you guys didn't set this specific way, or this permission that you left on the network that's vestigial from some older domain that you ran before, provided some kind of a way in as far as privilege escalation was concerned, or something like that.
Yeah. Joseph, you unmuted.
Yeah, so what I like to add is that it's not just Active Directory that I think that applies to. I think that's pretty general. And
Sure.
there's one what's the word? There's one kill chain, one kill chain that we did that really stands in my mind as something that really highlights the limitation of these automated solutions. And obviously, I can't really talk about the specifics, but I'll say enough that both of you will know what I'm talking about, I think. So there was
I
one,
already do, but okay.
You might or might not. There was an organization where, okay, so one of the things that the team does, a TTP it's just part of our tool chain at this point, is when we get access to SMB file shares, we go through them, right? If we find guest access to a file share, or we have low level privileges, we'll go and we'll look through file shares, because again, we're not, the OS level exploits, like Gene said, they're not there as much anymore. So we're focusing on, hey, we have access to be able to read these files, so let's go look and see what we can find in them. And I remember there was one time where Gene found a NTLM hash, I should say, in a text file, but it wasn't a regular NTLM hash. It was an NTLM hash that was big endian encoded. And
okay, I remember this. Yeah.
There is no way that an automated solution, even if it was looking for NTLM hashes, it would not recognize it. That was something that an automated solution simply would never find. But there it was an NTLM hash just sitting in a text file with, I don't remember if it was low privilege or guest access, but it was just there. And that's the sort of thing that a human pen tester is going to be able to find, that you're not going to get that from an automated solution.
All right. So with the time that we have left, I would like to address an important question, and this this is an extremely rant friendly question, and I want to minimize the amount of ranting, mostly on my own part. But so a lot of in the cybersecurity world, marketing hype is it's like a separate character, right? And is part of, honestly, it's part of the attack surface of the enterprise world, is this hype that the way things are sold, they are oversold, they are overpromised, right? So what is a huge misconception that CISOs, chief information security officers, or IT blue teams are, what sort of misconceptions about these automated tools, come from this hype problem? Gene, I'll let you take it first.
Okay. I think the biggest misconception is that this is, like I said at the beginning, a one-to-one replacement for humans. If you run an automated pen test on your network and it says that, oh, there's 10 vulnerabilities in the network, update your OS, and then you go through that, you run it again, and it pretty much says you're all in the clear now. I can 100% understand why somebody who's paying good money for a product would think, okay, well, I should be good to go now. But as we showed through the pen testing and the demonstration within the paper itself, that's often not the case. And I just find it a little bit disconcerting that so many people feel that are marketing this as a way to offset the costs of a human and make it to where you don't need a human anymore. I don't think that's an accurate depiction of what pen testing should look like. What I would argue for would be more along the lines of using both, within tandem of each other. And that's what the paper argues for. So any kind of a concept, any kind of a thought that this is a complete replacement for humans, I think is going to lead you down a bad path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would seem to me that the current the current poison pill in the marketing and / hype world is AI and LLMs, and things like that. And I don't think that ultimately even the vaunted LLMs, AIs, GPTs, and so forth are going to be able to replace humans. However, I think that we are evolving into a world where such systems are going to change the way that penetration testing is done.
Yep.
But so we'll ask this question. So we've spent about an hour hammering on these automated systems, and you just mentioned this, but I would like to. I don't want to give them short shrift, and I do not want to take away from the technical usefulness of these tools. So can you sort of unpack how it is that you would see, like you said, that you would have a both and approach? What does that look like for an organization? What's the best way to combine the automated and the manual for a standard enterprise?
Well, with regard to AI, which is a separate topic strictly from automated pen testing, although they're becoming increasingly integrated together, I think AI has a place. I think that just like it should be a tool, just like a calculator, where if it makes you do 10 times 10 faster, you can find the answers 100 faster. That's great. But if you don't understand how to get to 100 from 10 times 10, that's where the issue lies. And that's what we're seeing with coders. That's what we're seeing with a whole lot of different things, especially like junior developers, is that they don't understand the code that the AI is providing them. And that's where the issue becomes. It should be a productivity increaser as opposed to a productivity replacer.
Mm-hmm.
As far as automated pen testing is concerned, the main concern here again is just that you should never look at it as a replacement for the human. You should look at it as something that can help fill in the gaps. So you can't nobody can afford to have a pen tester on site all year round, checking things over and over and over again. And oftentimes that wouldn't be conducive to their environment anyway. But having an automated solution that is consistently going through and checking the really low hanging fruit. Are you keeping OSs up to date? Have you put an application on the network recently that has a really well-known CVE associated with it, with an exploit chain that can compromise that host or something that's really low-hanging, doesn't really require any kind of like deep thought, just does this exist? I think it's really good. I think it's like a vulnerability scanner, but a little bit better. And it does provide some level of insight into your network on a consistent basis, whether or not you're keeping things up to date, whether or not the processes that you've established are being followed. I think it provides a lot of value there. But it's just like brushing your teeth, where like every year, you go to the dentist, you get a checkup, make sure that everything's fine. But you brush your teeth every day. That's how we try to look at pen testing, is that you should have some kind of a daily or weekly report that's running that shows a general idea of what your health is of the network. And then every year have somebody come in and give you a checkup and say, okay, well, all of this is right, but you've got this outlier that you probably need to take a look at.
Yeah. Joseph, did you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a great analogy. It's just like Gene's saying, I think at the end of the day, you have to think about, is the automated solution good enough? And I think the answer is it's good enough for your regular sort of routine cleaning if you will, is for brushing your teeth, but it's not good enough to fix your cavities. Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to find those really hinky misconfigurations, or that, not necessarily. You can't trust it to. You can't trust it to find the things that you might be missing. But it's going to be great if you just need something that's going to scan your whole network, and it's going to point out all these systems that have this vulnerability or this misconfiguration, this common misconfiguration. But you really need both.
Yeah. Well, I just thought of this question while you were talking, Gene, is so something that we had mentioned earlier is the concept of a pen test being a good smoke test for an organization. Do you think that automated solutions could provide that as well? Sort of like a smoke test for their eyes in the wire, so to speak?
Sure. Given the fact that it uses a lot of just basic Metasploit modules, that's what we identified while it was running through its test, was a lot of Metasploit, Eternal Blue, zero logon, things like that. A lot of that will be caught by an EDR, or probably even a SOC that's monitoring the hosts. So it can be a great smoke test in that regard. Again, the whole thing to keep in mind here is that just because you've patched up your host doesn't mean that you've caught every little misconfiguration that's there.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that I would say is this is what I say whenever I talk to people, is that the cybersecurity problem itself is a complex systems problem, right? I'll put on my nerdy computer sciencey hat and talk about complex systems just for a second. And an important thing to understand is that when we have an enterprise network, we have a multi-resolution complex system, right? Which means that security itself, even if you get the penetration test, even if you have the automated penetration testing solution, there is no replacement for the ability to adapt and survive under a period of crisis, right? So one of the things, going back to the question of hype and so forth, that's important to bring up is that you can never buy yourself into security. It's not possible to buy a product that will make you secure, right? Because even those tools that you're buying may in fact be part of your attack surface, right? That's always a possibility. So it's important to remember that, even if you're getting, even if you're going to the dentist, right, and you're taking care of things on that perspective, you're getting your penetration testing yearly or every 6 months or whatever it is, and you have the automated pen testing solutions. It's my perspective that the most powerful and useful tool for keeping a network safe is your people, right? And it's not just your IT people, right? We cannot stress enough how important it is for the culture of an organization, especially an enterprise environment, the culture of not just the IT people, but the people in the organization itself, just the normal people doing their job, right? Because ultimately security is not the point of any organization, right? Security is something that is it's separate from the core goal. The core goal for a state organization is to perform the function that the state needs them to do, right? That's the purpose behind having IT, is to be able to do your job, right? Security is not really the point. But if you're going to have an organization be secure, having a culture where the people involved understand the threat, understand the importance of hygiene, of password hygiene. All right, and I will just leave this one example on the table. There's an organization that we worked with for years that we've done multiple penetration tests for, and I remember when we first worked with them. This is one of the first ones that Joseph and I worked with back in 2017, 2018 sort of time frame. I remember how bad off they were at the beginning, and the example, the data point I will use is say, passwords, right? So in the beginning, we would always, part of what we do in a penetration test is we'll take the domain passwords and we'll try to crack them using just basic consumer grade hardware and a very standard dictionary based attack. And I remember at the beginning, this organization, we were cracking 78%, 79, 80% of their passwords, right? By the time, after years of working with them, talking with them, and after them, taking what we had to say, taking it seriously, and improving the culture of security in their organization, not necessarily within the IT department, but outside of it in the larger organization. They went from 78% crack rate to like 4%, right? They have significantly improved their security because it ultimately comes down to that culture. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. But.
No, absolutely. I mean, the people that are on your network all day, every day are always going to be the first thing that you really need to take a look at as far as really trying to tighten things down. It's building a security culture within the organization, and that can be one of the most challenging things to do because a lot of people find security to be an obstacle as opposed to something that helps them. But I 100% agree that moving from short, easily guessed passwords to longer passphrases, being more skeptical with how phishing emails are reviewed. Just building up that culture through security awareness training and things like that. That all pays its dividends and then some as far as your network security is concerned.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like our immune system in our bodies, right?
Yep.
There's not a central unit inside of the body that determines how to deal with infections and things like that. Instead, we have the individual cells and the individual body parts and organs and cells. Security for the body is distributed across the entire body, right?
Yep.
And in that same way, and it doesn't even necessarily take a whole lot, right? They don't have to become security experts. You just cultivate a sense of professional paranoia when it comes to the internet, when it comes to the documents coming to you, the emails coming to you, all communications, especially now. I mean, I remember, Cassie, the first time that we talked about some of the dangers of AI. And one of the worst dangers of AI currently, as far as I'm concerned, is the social engineering aspect of it. The ability that you could take this podcast, you wouldn't even need more than 30 seconds of my voice to produce an AI version of me that you could type and it would sound like me, right? It doesn't take much, right? And cultivating that. All right, Joseph, you.
Oh, I was just going to say, it takes about 7 seconds, like 6 or 7 seconds of audio.
Thank you for making my nightmares even worse.
Yeah, so many of the big breaches that we've seen recently have all been predicated on some kind of social engineering. It's one of the easiest ways in. So
right.
definitely,
and that attack surface is not your IT crew. I mean,
yep.
I'm sure they do get attacked because they are a prime target, but it's the CFOs, it's the it's the people in the C-suite or the VPs right below that. I mean, the attack surface is the people, right? And so cultivating a sense of, I just put it like this, it's just professional paranoia. Everyone should be paranoid when it comes to digital things. You should always be paranoid of the device sitting in front of you. But that's my take. Well, Cassie, did you have any other thoughts?
I don't think so. But my paranoia is at a high. I do the HR and benefits and all those things and accounting with the company, and I want to see somebody's face, like make sure it's them and not an email, not even a phone call. So I'm all about seeing, and I was on a podcast recently and a guy was telling me a story about how a CEO and a CFO got on a call with the accounting girl, and she was like, I don't trust this. I want to see y'all. And it ended up being some type of AI something. It was a very expensive product. I think it was like $10,000 probably just to do it. But I think they got $500,000 from it. But it's just wild that there's even technology to that capability,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's almost like I don't know. This is giving me nightmares, and I do this for a living. But the whole idea is that we're going to have to approach the point where we are living in a permanent demilitarized zone, right? Where somebody who has any level of authority within an organization has to treat every human interaction like they're in the DNZ of North Korea or something, or that they have to have passphrases and some sort of system of exchange so that you can verify whether or not someone is actually who they say they are, right? You start up a conversation with the CEO is like, the weather sure is bright in Berlin, and then you have to respond with some sort of passphrase, just so that you can have a basic human conversation, which is frankly a nightmare. But that's where we're kind of headed to, right? So.
Right. I mean, you can't even verify birthday or anything like that because they could get that information as well.
Right.
So yeah, I guess the passphrase is the new thing that we'll have to go to.
It's like we're living in World War II. Joseph. Yeah.
We can all just have two-factor keys. We can have those UB keys. Just have them on our person. We can put them on a keychain.
How do you use that if you're trying to have a conversation with the CFO?
I don't know. You just plug it in your phone and have some like a verification thing on your.
More technology, more multi-factors for your MFAs. All right.
It's PGP.
Well, this has been a great. BGP. Oh gosh. All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Cassie, for getting.
Yes. Thank you all for joining me today, and I will put add a link for the paper in the show notes. So if anybody would like to take a look at that, you can view it there. And thank you all, and we'll talk next time. Y'all have a good day.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the NSI Podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share the episode. Got questions or topics you want us to cover? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. For more information, visit us at nextstepinnovation.com.